Turbo Conquering Mega Eagle! How are you all doing, folks? This is my now highly modified Chinese boot patching sewing machine. I was just going to do one big video of the whole process, but these things are getting so popular now that and no one really seems to be like heavily modifying them. People will stick electric motors on them, but not really sort out the foibles with these machines. And so what? I'm gonna break it down into like little nuggets. So if anyone else with one of these machines wants to follow suit and do something similar, it will be easier for them to follow along and see what I did if it's sort of broken down. And this is just a little introductory video of this machine and what I intend to do with it. So the shoe patch repair machine is an incredibly basic, crude cobbler's sewing machine. It's become quite popular because, as it's designed for sewing shoe repairs, it's capable of sewing much heavier materials than a domestic sewing machine, you know, what's commonly available to most people. I think really looking at it, this wouldn't be out of place at the top of a mine repairing labourers' shoes as they come out finishing their shift and that, you know, and certainly it would cope with that. The dust and adverse weather perhaps would hardly affect this machine, whereas you know, anything Western and more modern perhaps would struggle with those conditions. Now that I'm taking leatherwork a little bit more seriously, I'm finding the hand stitching is a bit too slow for me for the things I want to make. But also, I've started working in veg tan, and I want to make my projects a little bit more presentable. And one of the gripes I have with this machine is because of the way it's constructed. The parts are very poorly finished, and so you need a huge amount of oil in order to keep this thing running smoothly. I mean, for starters, it doesn't actually run smoothly. It's not at all like a Western sewing machine. You know, one of the old Singers or Joneses, or yeah, well, those are the only two sewing machines I've really had any contact with. But they run beautifully, don't they? There's no play in anything, and the noises they make are sewing machine noises. You know, as silly as it sounds, they have their own little noise, don't they? This thing though, it sounds I don't know, it's more like a steam train, clickety clack, and all that. Again, that's not a problem, but yeah, everything needs bathing in oil in order to get it working nicely. And I've certainly spoilt a few bits of leather now with oil, because regardless of how clean the oil is when you put it on, it washes the filth out of the machine, and then drops black splodges of oil on your work, or they run down to the foot, and you get a little smear of oil, which, as I'm sure you all appreciate, on untreated veg tan leather is most disagreeable. My other major complaints are regarding the ergonomics of the machine. You know, it's really hard to raise the foot. You have to reach over the machine and fiddle around for the bar on the back of the machine. So as far as doing quick work's concerned, it means taking your eyes off the job and your hand off the drive wheel. And because it's the right hand you're using to disengage the foot or to raise the foot, it means you can keep the workpiece in place, but then the crank wheel turns under its own power, and it might drop the needle back down again, for instance, depending on what position you stop the machine in. The quality of the bearing surfaces is a concern. It's not something that immediately affects the machine, but certainly there are plenty of people that complain about the machine losing the ability to do long stitches, and I put this down to wear. There's a few points on the machine that are really rough to start with, and for instance, the device, the wedge that moves the foot forwards and backwards, is a rough machine finish, and that wedge engages with a cast iron surface, and you know, when I finally took mine apart, I found that it actually started milling its way through the cast iron, even with the relatively low usage that I'd given the machine so far. The binding of the cams and some of the other joints on the machine made it hard for me to really ascertain when the needle was binding, or something bad was going on with my workpiece, because I'd either assume it was the machine, and in actual fact I was busily bending a needle, or vice versa. You know, I'd look at my work and make sure I wasn't bending a needle, but in fact the machine was just binding. As far as the appearance of the machine goes, I don't actually find it disagreeable. It's obvious what it is just from looking at it. You know, it's obviously a very crude machine. You know, exactly as it is, but what? It's not my style of preference. But you know, for the cost of the machine, I certainly forgive it its appearance. I'm very much in love with with these little machines. You know. Regardless of all its faults, it always puts a big smile on my face. You know, the noise it makes, and the no nonsense manufacturing. You know, is kind of like an old military vehicle, like not at all designed for being aesthetically pleasing, just designed to get a job done. So my modifications are really focused in three areas. The finish of the machine. This should help with aesthetics, obviously, but also in getting rid of the rough surfaces, it's going to make it a lot easier to clean. I'm looking at the fit and finish of all the parts, so where I'm not replacing things, I'm trying to get rid of the old dirt that's on them, and also polish them up where they're steel on steel, for instance, and they're sliding against each other. They benefit from being a polished surface, and that means they require less oil in the first place, and the oil that does come off them won't be black, greatly reducing the risk of ruining my workpieces, something I recommend everyone does, and that requires nothing but a bit of sandpaper. But thirdly, improving its operations and making it smoother, and I'm going to do this by placing bearings where possible, you know, with higher quality bearings, and installing bearings where there are no bearings. And as is the case in the rocker arms, I could have put bearings in there, but it would have meant massively increasing the size of the arms, so I used impregnated bushes, so they're oil-like bushes that just basically porous bronze with oil sat in the pores of the bronze, and that creates a very low friction surface. And then there was a lot of fettling in other places, like the cams, and my intention with this series of videos is not to you know, blow my own trumpet and say, hey, look at my machine, because I haven't been using it that long now, but really, just as a bit of inspiration for everyone else, you don't have to do things the way I've done them. So the second bearing I put on the hand crank shaft, I obviously went the very long way round and cast brass and then machined it on a lathe, and then sat a sealed bearing in there. You know, you can save yourself an awful lot of bother if you just used a similar oil-like bearing as I used on the control arms, and installed the oil-like bearing in the original factory pedestal, and that would give a very similar result. At the same time, there are going to be people out there that have more suitable equipment than I do, and perhaps more imagination. So the cam wheel itself, had I had the ability, I would have silver soldered it onto the shaft, and that would have saved me the effort of turning up a flange on the lathe and getting that all trued up, and then drilling and tapping the cam wheel to the flange. So when I go through these modifications, I'll do my best to perhaps give suggestions on ways of doing or achieving similar outcomes with minimal tools, as opposed to the tools that I'm using. You know, I'm not an amazingly skilled person, but I've collected a lot of very useful tools over the years, and that's obviously shaped the path that I took with this machine. Anyway, I'm going to try and get these series of videos up within a week, so I hope this isn't boring for my regular subscribers. You know, there's certainly lots of fun, casting and lathe work and that, and I also hope that it's very useful to people with this machine. That's about all I'm going to say now. Please check the playlist. I'll put all this in a big playlist. Anything to do with this machine I'll add to the playlist, maybe at a later date or whatever, any further upgrades I do. And if you've got any questions, if I've neglected to mention something, or if you've got any further questions on the machine, just ask. Yeah. Hope you enjoy it all and you like the finished result, and please join me, subscribe to my lovely channel, and hello everyone that's already subscribed, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.